I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Boise, and we're recording this presentation to provide education to the community on the upcoming Water Renewal Bond that's going to be on the ballot this November. Let me go to the next slide. So who are we? A brief introduction. We are the City of Boise's Water Renewal Services. We give new life to used water. So we take all of the used water throughout the city that's coming from residences, from commercial businesses, from an industry. So when you take a shower, you do the laundry, go to the bathroom, we take that used water and we send it to one of our facilities for a high level of treatment, and then we put that water back in the Boise River. So relatively, how much used water do we treat? We treat about 11 billion gallons a year of used water. If we were to take that water out onto the blue turf over at Albertson Stadium, the approximate height every day of the amount of used water that we treat is about 64 feet. So just to give you a sense of scale of how much used water we receive on a daily and annual basis. So we have a plan. Over the last 5 years, we've been working on what we refer to as the Water Renewal Utility Plan. This is a multi-year planning process that we undertook to make sure that we had a clear vision and strategy for the water renewal utility. And this plan dictates or outlines the next 20 years of our utility and the strategic direction for the utility. What was different about this utility plan than ones we've done in the past is that it was founded on community engagement. We started way back 5 years ago. One of the first steps that we did was to try to establish what are the possibilities of what we could potentially do with the utility, and let's test those broad concepts with the community. And then over that 5-year window, we narrowed that down to what you see in the utility plan. And how did we do that? We did it through things like statistically relevant surveys, community meetings, focus groups, stakeholder meetings. We had an advisory panel of citizens and businesses that we formed. There were over 20 folks on that panel. We met with them for 6 months, once a month for about 3 hours, and we really got into the details of what the Water Renewal Utility Plan could be for Boise. Out of those meetings came a recommendation for the utility plan, the overall approach. We then took that to the Public Works Commission, had several meetings with the commission on the utility plan and got approval from them for the plan. We made some tweaks to it. Then we took that to City Council, had several meetings with City Council who reviewed the plan, all culminating in October of 2020, where the City Council provided their approval on the Water Renewal Utility Plan. So now that we have a plan, the next question became, how do we best pay for it? Because in that plan, we're identifying a lot of community investment needs. We are obliged to treat wastewater under the Clean Water Act. So we have a permit from the EPA and the DQ that requires us to treat wastewater. And the system that we use to do that is significant. If we were trying to replace the system today, it'd be about $3 billion worth of assets that we'd have to replace. So when we look out into the future and what was identified in the utility plan, the primary driver is proactive repair and replacement of an aging system. As I mentioned, we have 2 water renewal facilities, one over at Lander Street, which is just off of Veterans Memorial Parkway. That was built in 1949. And we have the West Boise Water Renewal Facility, which is just off of Joplin Road, just to the north of HP, that was built in 1976. In addition to all of that, we have almost 1,000 miles of pipe underneath the city, with the oldest being installed in 1898. And you can see on the pictures on the left, the upper picture is the Joplin main, force main going into the West Boise facility before replacement. Those lines hanging down are gaskets. Those aren't supposed to be there. And this line was showing a lot of wear and tear. And so we had to make the decision at that point to replace it. And so what you see below is the 2018 Joplin main after replacement. And this is just an example of the condition of some of the assets in our system. They're not failing, but some of those assets are reaching the end of their useful life, and they just need to be replaced. Some of the other funding drivers that we identified in the utility plan were the community expectations that came out of the advisory group. There was a very clear expectation from the advisory group of citizens and businesses that they wanted us to start looking at diversifying our water supply. And we can do that in the Water Renewal Fund with the recycled water program. So we're starting up the recycled water program. In addition, there are regulatory requirements that we have to meet. I mentioned the requirement to treat wastewater. Those requirements are ongoing and typically getting more stringent. So we have phosphorus requirements that we have to meet. We have temperature requirements that we have to meet. And so there are regulatory requirements that are part of the plan. And then we also are a growing city. We have residential growth, but we also have businesses coming to Boise. We have economic development happening. And one of the first questions we typically get when a business comes to Boise is there enough capacity for wastewater? And so we need to make sure that that is available. So part of our one of the funding drivers moving forward is adding capacity to the system, room in the system, so we can make sure we have enough capacity to treat the growing amount of used water we receive. So I mentioned now that we have the plan and we've got all these funding drivers identified and how to approach the next 20 years, the next question becomes, how do we pay for it? And there really are two ways that utilities can pay for improvements. One is cash only, and that's traditionally what we've used here at the City of Boise. We've gone cash only. If we were to pursue cash only financing moving forward over the next 20 years, we would require significant upfront rate increases to meet the demands of the investments coming. However, if we did cash, that would result in lower total costs over the 20-year window. So there are some trade-offs. Another option for us to pay for the improvements is bond financing in combination with cash. Bond financing would allow us to keep the upfront rate increases lower and more predictable. However, it would result in higher total costs over the 20-year window because we have interest payments on the bond financing. So what does that look like from a rate standpoint? On this slide, what you're looking at is the amount of rate increases over the next 20 years from 2020 to 2040. And on the y-axis is just the monthly sewer rate. And so when we go forward with the bond election on November 2nd, what we're asking you is, would you like us to, yes, pursue bond financing? And that's the blue line that you see on the graph. So if we were to pursue bond financing, that would result in about a 9% rate increase on January 1st of 2022. And that would allow us to also provide more predictable rates over the life of the 20 years. However, if you see out here by 2040, the blue line is higher than the gray line, meaning rates at the end of the 20-year period will be higher. And that's because we'll have interest payments to make on the bond financing. The other option is the cash as you go. That would be a no vote. That would be saying that I want to go cash as we go. That would result in up to 53% rate increase on January 1st, 2022. You can see we'd have those additional rate increases going out. But then as we get out to 2040 for the cash financing, you can see it results in a lower rate at the end of the 20-year period because we do not have the interest payments on the bonds. So that's what the yes vote and a no vote would mean for rates and rate increases in 2022. Beyond 2022, these are estimates, but at least they're estimates to give us a sense for how rates would go into the future. So what is the purpose of bond financing? We alluded to some of those in the previous slide. If the voters so choose to give us the permission to take on bond financing, that would give us access to historically low interest rates. The city of Nampa here in the Treasure Valley back in 2018 got approval for taking on bond financing, and they got a loan from the state revolving fund, the DEQ. The interest rate that they got was 1.68%. So extremely low interest rate. We'd like to be able to access those low interest rates if possible, if the voters give us permission to go ahead and pursue bond financing. It would also allow us to access new funding sources. If the voters gave us the approval, we could then go to the state revolving fund at the DEQ or go to the EPA's WIFIA program, which is a federal version of the state revolving fund, and access potential loans through the state or the federal government. We could not do that if we do not have bond financing. I mentioned it reduces the upfront rate increases. And then last, it aligns costs with those benefiting from new infrastructure in the future. Some folks refer to this as generational equity, whereby we're having a much more predictable rate increase over time, and that the back end has a higher rate increases so that the folks are moving to Boise out into the future and paying a larger portion of the new infrastructure that they get into the future. So the total bond amount that we're asking from the voters is $570 million to be financed over 30 years. And we're requesting permission from the voters to borrow that money over the next 10 years. So the next 10-year window, we want to borrow up to $570 million, and that $570 million would be financed over 30 years, potentially 20 years, but depends on how the bond market responds to our requests. What does it pay for? It pays for a lot of things. Protecting and improving the reliable sewer service. We, the City of Boise, have a very reliable system. We'd like to keep it that way. We don't have system failures where we have to tell folks that they cannot discharge their used water from their homes or from their businesses. And we want to make sure that the system is able to continue to provide that high level of service. We want to protect and enhance the water quality of the Boise River. We have some proposals in the plan that would allow us to do some natural restoration along the Boise River to help deal with some of the temperature mitigation that's required. So think of stream restoration projects, side stream channel restoration, those type of projects to enhance the quality of the Boise River. We heard very clearly from the advisory group of citizens that they would like us to pursue water resiliency to help us diversify our water supply. So we are going to pursue a recycled water program in the southeast part of the city. We're very beginning stages of that concept, but we have committed to any new capacity that we add to the system will be a recycled part of our recycled water program. And then last but not least, we want to make sure we have enough capacity or room in the system to make sure that we can handle the used water that's coming from our community, a growing community, both from the residents and from businesses, commercial and industrial. So what does a yes vote mean and what does a no vote mean? So this November 2nd, you're going to see this on the ballot. A yes vote authorizes us to bond up to $570 million over the next 10 years. It results in lower upfront rate increases, specifically $3.64 per month for the average customer. A no vote indicates a preference for cash funding. It results in sharper upfront rate increases, specifically up to $19.50 per month for the average customer. So that gives you a sense of what your yes vote means and what your no vote means. Remember that a no vote, that cash funding results in lower overall cost. The yes vote results in less overall cost, but those reductions in rate increases up front. And then finally, who can vote? Who can vote? Our Boise residents within the City of Boise Water Renewal Service area. And so make sure you get out and vote this November. And thank you for the time. We appreciate it.